All right, I think it's up and running. All right, hello everyone. Hey guys, Jonathan Haberkorn here, live in Accelerators organization, doing my mentor session for you all. Awesome to be a part of Accelerators organization, dedicated to helping all of you get to 7 figures and beyond. So super excited, awesome organization to be a part of. And just a little bit about myself. I've recently became a mentor, graduated into the AO Squared with the help of all the other mentors that were in the Accelerators organization. And now is my opportunity to help share some of my experiences with you, help give back to this organization that's helped me, and help all of us get to, keep pushing the needle forward and getting to those 7 figures and beyond. So just a little bit more about myself. I own a company. I'm the CEO, founder of IntraZen. It's a company specializes in enterprise application software. We do systems design, integration, automation, etc. And so we go into companies and help them understand how they can operate better. And so like many of us, in the questions that we have today, that's what we want to do, right? We want to understand, how can we evolve our businesses? How can we be able to push the needle forward and remove roadblocks and constraints that we have? And so so that's what I'm here to help with. I'm very happy to be a part of this organization, but enough about me, because this is about you. Before I get started, I wanted to give a special shout out to Robin. Robin is an artist, Robin Turnip. I'm probably pronouncing the last name wrong. Robin, thank you so much. Thanks for sending this. I had noticed this morning when it was sitting on my desk, a beautiful piece of art, and the casing around it created all of this amplified light around it, which was really cool. So a big thank you to you. Really cool. For anyone else that's in the within AO, you want to check out some great art, just check out Robin. And she has some great art that she's doing here. This is one of a sunset. Okay. Thank you, Robin. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's jump into this. So the first question that has come in is from Selena Medina. And background, or the question is, what is a good way to develop a business plan? Okay. Background is, I have a service-based business, which is tattoos, and I have a ton of ideas and fragments in text, but I really don't know the first thing about writing a business plan. What should I include? Okay. All right, so business plan is a great way to help us organize our thoughts. There's templates that are out there online that you can get. And mainly what the business plan does, there's the primary sections within that would be to give a description about your company and different products that you're or services that you're going to sell, as well as what your target market is, being able to identify who your customer types are, as well as the services, the financials and forecast. So what that does is just kind of helps organize all the thoughts, especially if you need to present that out to other companies, and being able to be able to interpret or share if you're trying to get some financing, or you have to go to the bank. They're going to want to see that you have an organized thought around what your business is and where it's going. I would also like to say, definitely, if you're in that mindset, you're trying to figure out, just taking all these ideas, another good exercise is to go through branding. From a branding perspective, you'll go through and you'll be identifying your why, your mission, your vision, and your core values. And also, like the business plan, it helps you orchestrate your business and your understanding, or the reason of why it exists. And that's kind of what a business plan does too. So both are great exercises. A couple things I want to share with you. You already are part of AO, so one of the things that you can do is check out the $1 Million Business Plan. There's a training that's in there, and that'll take you through everything you need to know. I went through it, a lot of us have gone through it, and that's not going to cost you any more, which is awesome. So, you know, in terms of being able to extract the maximum amount of value from the accelerators, go in there, check that out. Other free ways that you can help build out your business plan is by looking at the SBA, Small Business Administration website, that has templates that are out there as well. There are more structured ways as well in which you could pay for. There's one called Live Plan, and this kind of takes you step by step. It's orchestrated basically, you know, just more of a wizard-like approach if that's something that you'd be willing to pay for. In my experience, there's plenty of value just getting a template and trying it out yourself first before you want to pay. Unless you really get stuck, then I would go for a wizard-like type of approach with Live Plan. Okay? All right, looks like we have a bunch of people who've joined us. That's awesome. So hey, Mark, Nick, we've got Joe and Robin. Hey, Robin. Great. Looks like we've got some others. Todd is here as well. Awesome. Cool. So let's move onward to the next one. We've got Mark Gibson. Okay. Hey, Mark. All right, so question asked. What process would be the best to define leap of faith assumptions when trying to bring a product to market that has never been developed before? Okay, this is a good one. Background is currently developing a non-technical data analytics tool, business intelligence, for small businesses to be able to readily have access to data analytics. Okay. We are currently in the period of uncertainty of who our initial target audience will be. Currently working on developing a minimum viable product that encompasses KPIs that most businesses would find useful. We are looking to gather attention of our basic KPI framework for most businesses. After defining our key assumptions on our target audience, we'll look to present the current minimum viable product and further refine the KPIs to the particular industry business model. Okay. All right, so for those that don't know, leap of faith assumptions. So basically what we're talking about here is a lean approach. And so I have some experience around. I'll share what I know about it. I have not done that in particular, but I can share my experience in a similar nature of that. Okay, so basically, how do you know? So the question was, what process would be best to define leap of faith assumptions when trying to bring a product to market that has never been developed before? So basically, how do you know, like, what's the success criteria that you would want to have in order to say, all right, let's put some more investment in this. This is the right path. So in my experience, it's all about identifying the need and what the addressable market size is. So I would look at that first. I'd say, okay, I mean, in this case, you have, my assumption is, unless a business already has KPIs, then they should, you know, your addressable market is those that don't have KPIs, or that would, you know, be of the size, you know, a small business. And so you want to take a look at that first, and then be able to say how many companies are having this problem. So out of that, I mean, there's 32.5 million companies that are in the United States. You just want to slice that, and then you can get to your target market. Then I would build out the definition of success criteria. So basically, you know, being able to say, okay, if we have X amount of clients that said that this would be helpful, then let's go down this path. You know, or you would come up with various types of criteria that would be useful for a particular set of industries, and then, you know, kind of shop that around multiple clients, you know, and then build out this proof of concept. That's basically, then you have your KPIs or your success criteria, and now you want to shop around your proof of concept. Obviously, you don't want to go spend a ton of money up front and not have a market need. That's the whole hypothesis that you want to be able to find, right? So where is the right market? Who can afford it? I mean, just in general, my experience working with a lot of companies is every company wants to be able to know what's going on in their systems and within their business, and so being able to unlock that is going to be powerful. So that's one way to do it. The other way is to take the first step, shop it around, and just keep iterating and iterating and iterating. And so instead of doing this kind of lean approach, you can go more agile. You do an agile approach, proof of concept straight into a pilot, a small pilot, and then keep iterating from there. And what you'll find through each of those iterations is, your market, where you'll find where that market is at, and whether or not there's that need. Oftentimes what happens when you're inventing something new, you're going down a path and you expect one thing, but then you found out several steps down, oh, actually there's a bigger need over here, and then that's where you end up landing. Where businesses start out isn't necessarily where they end. So you may have an idea in mind, just be open to the fact that there can be other pathways along the way. So I think you're going down the right path here. I wouldn't get too caught up in just having everything perfect. It's not all going to be perfect up front. It's better to make progress over the perfection, and so, but you also want to be smart about it. So you're taking a catered approach, making sure you're not making a dumb move here. Over investing in something that there's not a need. So so you're on the right path. We can certainly have more conversation around it, but I would build out that success criteria, build a proof of concept, and get in front of as many people as you can to really understand, okay, which is the right path to get going down. Okay? All right, I hope that helped. Cool. All right, so we have another one from Gabriella Binkley. Okay. Question asked, should I validate my service and business process before offering my services to the public? Okay. Background is, I'm a prospect finder. I help independent professionals build their success network by reaching out to their ideal prospects. I've been working with my first client. I'm enjoying the learning experience. She's also enjoying this opportunity to do something she's never done in her business. This service contract covers 3-month period. I would have preferred to teach her the prospect finding contracting process. This would have enabled me to dedicate time to reach new prospects. I feel like this experience is giving me a better way to market my service before sharing this with a large group of connections like my social media contacts. Okay, so there's a couple perspectives that I have on this, which is we can talk about it at a couple different levels. Okay, similar to what Mark was speaking about, it's I have a business and I want to be able to get this out, and I want to make sure that this is going to work, that I'm actually have the right process and have the right things in place, and everything's good to go, and then I scale. So my perspective around this is, you can learn as you go and iterate. Progress over perfection, like I was just saying, being able to take those iterative steps forward. As long as you keep making those steps forward and learning and calibrating, you will, you'll be able to take all those learnings and then be able to apply them as they go forward. Another way that you can do this is via like a small pilot. So maybe you get a small group together. You've kind of ironed out your processes and worked it out to the best of your ability up front, and then you have a small pilot group, and I like to call them friendlies. So if you've got some, companies that you've worked with, or people that you can bounce ideas off of, maybe even some people in AO that you could say, hey, I'm working out this process. I would love to provide you value. Let's go through this together, and you could do a small pilot. The other way is, if you're pretty well good, like if you've got industry experience around this topic, prospect finding, then I would highly recommend at that point that, okay, if you know what's, if you have a well-defined process, then you can pressure test that. It sounds to me like you're kind of still working that out, so I would go with, like the iterative approach, or do a small pilot. But in the end, at some point you're going to want to pressure test that, because when I say pressure testing, what I mean by that is when you're first starting out, you might be wearing a lot of the hats and doing all the things. If you're scaling up, how well are you going to be able to scale that out? And that's what I call pressure testing it. So you can do that by working with somebody who's really good in, let's say, Excel, or just mapping out what the needs are. So if you're going to certain levels, and all of our goals here in AO, at least it's a start, is to get to 7 figures. So you'd want to map this out to say, okay, here's at 7 figures, this is how many prospects I need to be finding, how many clients I would have, how many people I will need to have on my team, and things like that. So so that's something for you to consider as well. Just kind of as you mature in the organization. So start out small, iterate, do a small pilot if you need, work out the kinks, and then start layering more and more on more and more customers. Okay? All right. Very good. Next, we've got Bob Guyer. Okay, is leading with price the best way to start a sales conversation with a prospect? Background is, I'm promoting a software and service package that is drastically less expensive than competitors. At the top of my funnel to get prospects on demo calls, should my messaging be focused just on price? The goal of my business is to make cybersecurity tools more accessible to organizations by reducing total cost of ownership. Okay, that's pretty cool. The existing solutions for the niche I work have high costs for software licenses and services. I'm developing a super lightweight software solution to solve the same problem at 20% of the price of the other option. That's okay. My target companies would have 3,000 employees, and my solution would be priced at 20K versus 100K by competitors. All right, so the question is leading with price the best way to start a sales conversation with a prospect? Okay, in my perspective, in my experience, I don't lead with price, I lead with value. My first thought here is, this is a drastic difference, 20K to 100K. So is there a way here that, okay, it sounds like you've been able to lower the cost and create the same level of value, or nearly the same. So why would you price it at 20K? I guess, when the competitor is at 100K. So in my experience, what I have found is to price based on value and communicate on value. I don't want to be racing to the bottom. If you can get someone to pay, 70K, that's already cheaper than 100K. Some companies will go for that, or even if it's half of that. So I would lead with the problem that I'm solving and making sure that we understand what is the pain point that they have, and then the icing on the cake is the value, or the pricing. So the value is the problem that's solved. The pricing is the icing on the cake here. So if you can construct both of those well together, then you'll get a lot of clients. Also, I would just think about this in maybe a tiered approach, or maybe a couple different ways. So for example, instead of just having like a 20K solution, you can have like a tier. So it's like maybe tier A is 70,000, B is 50,000, and then C is 20,000, and you get, there's different levels of support or something around that. Just to make sure that you're covering a gamut here. If you can get customers to pay more for the value, then absolutely you'd want to do that. So consider that as well. Then the other thing that I've thought about is the maybe pricing with a discount. So if competitors are doing 10K, then maybe you can come in at that, but then give a discount if there's some pushback. So I wouldn't necessarily just come in at 20K is what I'm saying here. So maybe think about a tiered approach, or maybe meeting where the same level of value at that price point of 100K, and then have a discount for that. Okay, but I would definitely not start with the price. I would start with what is the problem you're solving and the value that you can deliver for that. Price is just one point of the overall value. Okay? Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, next question is from Cheston Salisbury. How can I create a bigger sense of urgency around money, around making money? Okay, this is a good one. I've been an entrepreneur for 10 plus years, have always made just enough, but have never really had a strong desire to make more than just enough. Yes, I want to make more, have more, and be more, but there are obviously some serious mental hurdles I haven't been able to overcome. What mindset shifts do you recommend to go from being not money motivated to I can do, have, be more with more income? What are different ways to look at the issue that could be motivating, exciting to me, as opposed to just making more money? Are there different objectives you've experienced that are just as rewarding as having a big bank account that motivates and inspires you? Okay, so it's kind of what you're asking here is about purpose. Okay, how can I create a bigger sense of urgency around making money? And so there's a couple things that you want to consider here, which is your why big enough? And so like a simple way to understand that is, what does your vision look like? What does the mission of the company look like, and those core values? And are those well defined, or do they need to be updated? Because you should be quite motivated. I mean, when you own a business, it becomes somewhat, it is like an extension of yourself. And so if you're really passionate about that, you'll work all kinds of hours, you'll sacrifice all kinds of things because you could see the value out of that. And money is one value that comes out of that. So my guess here is that, the why isn't big enough, or maybe you got to kind of rethink through that, maybe go back to your branding, or do a branding exercise again and redefine that vision, mission. The other piece is to just think about it in this way, that money is an enabler. Money is going to give us the ability to do things. So if our why is big enough, then having more money along the way is going to allow us to do more of that on a larger scale. So we can service more customers. We can, not just from the business perspective, but even from maybe your family's perspective. And so being able to provide. So one of the things that I ask a question to myself on whenever I come up on these kind of crossroads. It's that I ask myself, who loses if I don't win? So who loses if you don't win? Okay, so maybe you need to take some time to think about that and come up with those reasons, and then being able to have that why defined should drive you to wanting more. Okay, set big goals. Sometimes it's just we get in mental blocks. Maybe we're burnt out. That could be a thing that's going on as well. So you probably want to just evaluate that. Maybe you need a little time to just reset and think. I know that I personally do smash the reset button quite often, just to keep the brain focused and sharp and reevaluating what's important to me. And so consider that. Also, just from a money perspective, I want to talk about that for a second. In my experience, along the journey of reaching 7 figures, I have found that when all my needs were met, I wasn't just thinking about how am I going to eat today and just the basic bills and stuff. My mindset and psychology changed from just having my needs met to how can I provide more value? How can I provide more value to the world? And so one of the things that I did was to kind of help myself with that, and I learned along the way, I built up a huge emergency fund. And so what that did, just having that money kind of sitting off to the side, gave me some sense of security. And so therefore, that I had all my bills and everything and my needs met, plus I had some surplus that was there, which then the psychology changed to unlock new and creative ways of thinking, because I wasn't focused on just barely getting by or having just enough. And so that's a really cool place to be in, because it expands the brain. I don't have to focus on just the daily, how am I going to eat things, the survival, but now how can I thrive? How can everyone else around me thrive? How can my business expand and grow and I can help more people in the world? And so, so that's something to think about. Money is the enabler here to allow you to do that. And so spend some time thinking about that vision. Think about who loses if you don't win, and what you would do with that extra capital. You can deploy that and use that in meaningful ways. Okay. All right. Very good. Hope that was helpful, Cheston. All right. We have another question that has come in. Yemisi. How do you know if you've done all you can to improve your business? We're a math tutoring business and have about 80 to 100 students. We have remained flat. Things are still stagnant, and we think we have looked at every aspect of the business, from pricing to membership to marketing to staff. We don't want to sell our business because of something we totally overlooked, and then things just take off for another owner. What are things we can do to help? What are things we can do to help us get back into growth mode? Okay. All right. So the question was, how do I know you've done all you can do to improve your business? I don't think there's an end to that. Business continually evolves. That's an important aspect. If you're not growing, changing, or adapting, you're basically going to become obsolete as a business. And we know this because the world is always changing around us. The economy is changing, political things are changing, our target markets are changing, and so we have to adapt. Technology is always changing too. So here you're running a math tutoring business, and I guess there's a couple things that maybe I would want to understand to answer this question. I'll try to go through them. So one would be, are you trying to drive up your memberships meaning so you can have, grow from, your 80, 100 students to more. And is that the constraint? Is it that you are doing marketing, however, you're not getting, qualified leads? Is that the constraint? So I think you have probably multiple things to think through here, but in my experience, what I have done is I'm always looking at constraints in business, whether it's my business or I'm out there supporting others. And so you want to be able to identify where's the problems at. So how do you know if there's a problem? Well, you need to have goals, and you should have some KPIs around that. And I love the fact that you're math tutoring, so this probably could come pretty natural here. If you have KPIs that are set up across each of the areas of business, and I'll talk about them. So you have your sales, you have your marketing, you have your operations, right? There's more like HR, tech, and back office stuff. So, but the big ones, so sales, marketing, and your operations, okay? Now, you should have KPIs within each of these. And maybe you can connect with Mark, because Mark is literally trying to make KPIs around all of these topics. So this could be a good connect for you with Mark Gibson. All right. But you want to have KPIs. And so then once you have these KPIs, you're measuring against those. So you know, okay, this area is working, this area is not working. And those KPIs, what you'd want to do is also benchmark them against the industry. So so you're not just making up some random KPI. You're like, oh, it should be this, and we're not getting there. Well, okay, what is going on in the industry, and then what is it, for you? And try to compare those up. That should help you to try to understand what's going on. Where's the problem exactly? And if you don't have those, probably that could be a good next step for you to set up some time, go through those, and then put this tracking mechanism in place. Now, I kind of liken it to flying an airplane. You need to have feedback. You need to be able to see where you're at. Where's your altitude? What's your speed? Or like driving a car. We need this feedback in our business, so that should help. Now, again, I don't think you can ever run out of any areas to improve your business. There's always things that are going on. There's always the world is always changing around us. We can always improve, and so our KPIs do give us that ability. Now, I don't know if this is if this is just an in-person, or perhaps like in-person math tutoring, or perhaps online, or both. But when I think about scalability of a business, if there's any way you can do this math tutoring, I see there's 80 to 100 students that you're servicing now. Can you change your market size by being online somehow? Can you create courses, or can you do something? Can you change your addressable market size to be more than this 80 to 100? And online is a great way to do that. The use of technology is a great way to do that. And so maybe consider thinking about those options if you're thinking about the scaling. Scaling also, you want to consider it. You want to consider what is going to be resource intensive versus, and when I say resource, I'm saying needing, as you scale up, you need more people to help support. There are other ways that you can scale up by use of technology, but not needing as many people to help support, and that's when you can really really move with scale. I mean, the internet is vast, so there's a huge amount of market that's out there, and the use of some technology around this, I'm sure, could help with the growth. Of course, still need your KPIs as well. Okay, hope that was helpful. If you have any other questions on that, please do reach out to me. Okay. All right, the next question is from Ricardo Delgado. All right. How do you hire a manager for your company or hire a lead? I have a barbershop and I currently still work inside the business. although eventually I want to step outside the business. That would mean I need to hire a manager or lead. What do I look for when doing this, or when should I start? Okay. So how do you hire a manager for your company? All right, so there's tactical ways of doing this. So I'll get very tactical. First, you're going to need to identify the need. That's where the recruiting process begins, identifying the need for the hire. Okay, so at what point do you believe that you will need to hire somebody to do that? That's going to be a question that you'll have to answer. And probably a good way to do that is to go into like Excel, or maybe you can work it out, just draw it out on paper and say, okay, after X amount of clients, I will be able to have, you know, X amount of sales that are coming in. So I don't know your price point, but you have to figure that out and say, okay, how will I know that I can pay for this manager? And so, and that's part of the scaling challenge of any business, right? You want to bring in more people, but you have to have enough capital to cover that, right? So you can model that out, and if you want, we can spend some time. You know, we can. There's some templates that are out there. We could certainly help share those with you. And then now, tactically, how do you go about it? Well, you can do online postings, you know, like Indeed. There's probably some local, maybe some local news agencies where you can do postings there as well, and be able to, you know, write out your job description, what the expectations are, salary, any type of benefits. There's a whole talent attraction process that companies go through. So I know, you know, you're still scaling here. So you can do some simple things as just writing out that job description, but write it in a very attractive way. Okay, and if you need help with that, there are people within AO who can help with that, or we can get some people to help you or point you in the right direction. Okay, and so you'll list out what are your minimum requirements and your preferred requirements, or your preferred values, you know, or needs or preferred skills. So minimum requirements and preferred skills. Okay, and then as those candidates start applying, you need to be able to shortlist them. So you'll read through their resumes if you get those. Otherwise, you'll set up an interview and you'll have a discussion with them, and you want to rate them on their competencies, basically. So will they meet the criteria for the job? Okay, and so I don't know, maybe as a barber, if they would also bring in some kind of work, you know, like a presentation on, you know, all the different styles of haircuts that they've done, some pictures or some things like that. I don't know, that perhaps maybe there's a way that they can do, you know, like on like a test cut, and just be able to see, you know, does this person have the skills to be able to be a barber. But then, rewind. This isn't for barber, this is for the manager. So the manager doesn't necessarily need to have the same skills. Ideally, they would, because if somebody steps out of the business and they need to step in, they could easily do it. So if you have somebody that is already a barber but has business experience, then that would be an ideal fit here. Okay, but it's not completely necessary. It would be ideal, though. Okay, you can have a manager that is managing people that doesn't have, you know, haircut experience. They're not a barber, but they have to manage the business aspects, and then they report to you, right? So as you're growing, you might have a ton of barbers that are there, and there's scheduling, there's all types of administrative work that needs to be done, in which a manager would do. They don't have to necessarily know how to cut the hair. If you can get best of both worlds, that would be ideal. Okay? All right, hopefully that was helpful for you, Ricardo. Ricardo, I'm proud of you. You're asking a lot of questions. I see all these questions coming through, so good job. I love it. That is how growth happens. Keep engaging. Okay. All right. Next is the last question. So we have Melinda Clark. Should I rent a brick and mortar office space? Okay. I'm a nurse practitioner with a health and wellness practice. Small startup side gig, still not very established. I'm primarily offering concierge home services right now. I keep tossing around the idea of having a brick and mortar location, thinking it might be of somewhat easier to market. Of course, that comes with more overhead expense. Yes, this is the scaling problem. I definitely have some fear around this and biting off more than I can chew. To mitigate some of this, I'm also considering, if allowed in the lease, subletting part of the space to other professionals who offer services that complement but don't compete with mine. I plan to reach out to the landlord of the space I'm interested in this Friday to get more information. Okay. Should I rent a brick and mortar office space? So here's my perspective on this, and I'll share my experience as I was making a jump into my business full time. So one of the things I ask myself is, what happens if I don't have customers, right? This is a natural thing, you know. We kind of stand at the edge and we're like, oh, what happens if this and this and this and this, right? So it's kind of, there's this psychology that's involved in this. So when I wanted to make that jump into my business full time, I kind of played out all these different scenarios, and I came to this question, which was, what would make me feel good, you know, about making this change? What would I need? And then I thought, what's the furthest thing that's like that I could think of that would be so unrealistic that if this happened, I would have, you know, it would just be very unrealistic. And if I can solve from that worst case scenario, if I can solve for that first, then I know I would be comfortable making this change. And I know it's kind of like maybe a negative way of thinking about things, like, oh, what's the worst case scenario? But I mean, you want to go into this eyes wide open. You know, you don't want to make a decision here that you're gonna, you know, put you 10 steps back. And so planning for the worst but expecting the best is an approach. So in my experience, what I did is I said, okay, this is what I would make me feel comfortable of being able to make this jump and knowing that I could survive for some time. So that, what I drew from that, or what made me feel comfortable, was how basically saving up two years worth of expenses. And the reason why I came to 2 years worth of expenses is because most businesses, the statistic average is 2 years that a company exists, and then they don't survive more than 2 years. So my thought was, I want to save up for 2 years, and then, or save up 2 years worth of expenses, and then I'll go make this jump. Was that an overkill? Now looking back on it, probably, but that's what I felt comfortable with, of being able to make that jump. And so if you're thinking about this, making this next step in your business, you know, renting a brick and mortar office space and this being a next big step for you, maybe you want to, before you go down that path, that you probably want to maybe save some capital up, and so that way you've got some runway here that will give you, you know, a good chance of being able to bring in, you know, customers and you know, rent out that place for some time. Also, there's something inherent about this process. When you go through if this is meaningful enough to you, then if you set an X amount that would make you feel comfortable to make this change, then you will work very hard to do that. Okay, there's a guy by the name of Demarius who's done something similar here, and he became the MVP in AO, and you know, he had set a target, and he said, I want to make X, you know, we're going to set here, and I'm going to work towards that and achieve that. Then I'll know I'm really serious about this change. And so, so there's an inherent thing when you follow that process. that when you set that target, and before you make this big jump, you reach this other target, which is going to make you feel comfortable, you know you're pretty well committed. You know, you're going to go through the trials and tribulations of achieving that, and then you know that, okay, yeah, you should feel very comfortable in making that change, because look, if you don't do it that way, the other way that will pan out, you go and you get this place, then you get the brick and mortar office, and then what will happen is you got to keep up with that, right? It's kind of the sink or swim. Well, instead of taking that big step first and getting that brick and mortar office space, why not try to work on this other step first? Save up some capital that will give you a nice runway there to feel comfortable in making the change, and that should really help you out there. Okay, so in my experience, that's what I have done. I don't have a brick and mortar office, but when I was making this change to go into the company full time, that's what I did, and it is a good process to follow. Okay, all right. I hope that was very helpful for everyone here. That was the last of the questions. I just want to make a remark here that, you know, we're all mentors. Keep asking questions. This is the pathway. So coming from, you know, a recent graduate into the AO squared, it does take getting involved and seeking out the questions, finding these constraints, these hurdles, and being able to get all these different perspectives, right? And so what I offered up today was just my perspective. I hope that you find some value in that. Ask around. You're going to find other mentors in here, and they'll bring some additional perspective as well. And we're all here to help you accelerate your journey, right? We want to get you to those 7 figures. Okay, well, hope that was helpful for everyone. Again, Jonathan Haberkorn. Feel free to reach out to me, and if you have any further questions on these topics, and we're happy to help. Thanks, everyone. Take care.